What are the most scary theories in the world? Story one: that every UFO that has been reported is actually a part of one of the government's black budget secret programs, which get over $60 billion in funding each year, and that the government has created such a stigma around UFOs and aliens that it would be entirely feasible for them to create the ultimate false flag event. Think 9/11 times 1 million, to make the populace believe there is an actual alien invasion happening so they can either A, create a situation that would help pull the world together, or B, give them an excuse to pour hundreds of billions of dollars more into the military program without the people questioning it? Story 2: we are all just code in a simulation being run by a far more intelligent species who is trying to determine why humans died out long ago. They run the simulation to cover millions of years, to pinpoint the moments where we went wrong, and to learn why civilization crumbled, to prevent the same fate from taking them. When we die, our code is either terminated entirely or is repurposed into another life in a form of digital reincarnation. Story 3: pharmaceutical companies are withholding a cure for cancer because of how much money they make from the current treatments, such as chemo. Now, I know that there are tons of cancers, so there being a single magical cure is something that just will never happen. But imagine how scary it would be if it were true. These companies are so greedy that they are not only willing to kill millions of people, but also put their family and friends through the terrible ordeal of watching them die slowly from cancer. It's pretty messed up. Story 4: if there's another species out there in the galaxy capable of reaching us across the vast distances of just this one galaxy amongst countless, they're at a technology level that would make the disparity between 21st century Western nations and some tribal village in Afghanistan look so even, to be imperceptible on a graph to the human eye. They either ignore us because our little trip to Mars is cute but primitive, and our planet doesn't hold anything like the resources found in the stars, or they just neutron sweep us for a giggle, and you die instantly, along with the entire species, without ever knowing they were out there. Story 5: I'm a fan of death by quantum ground state. One of the quantum fields has a non zero amount of energy at its lowest state. In theory, if it were to reach a value of zero, it would kind of undo physics by changing one of the fundamental constants. It would also drag the surrounding area into this new state. The chain reaction will move at the speed of light, so there is no way to know it's coming. If it can happen naturally, it likely already has happened somewhere and just hasn't reached us yet. Merry Christmas. Story 6: the idea that history literally and exactly repeats itself over and over again for eternity is pretty scary to me. It would mean our lives are preordained and we can't do anything to affect the course of the world. Also means we have to relive all of our bad times over and over again eternally. The good times too, of course, but maybe it's just me. I don't think that outweighs reliving all the bad times, and I've had a good life. Now imagine someone who lived their entire life in prison or whatever. Hell is a scary concept, of course, but that's an obvious one. There's nothing non-scary about the idea that some mystery entity might torture you with hot irons forever if they don't like you. Considering the sheer injustice of being born into a world where that's going to happen to you is just appalling. Story 7: Feynman's paradox and great filter. The first says that aliens should exist and have a billion years head start. They would spread exponentially, and we would at least see traces of their massive energy consuming civilizations. But we don't. The great filter is one of the possible solutions. It proposes that there is a filter which is impossible to pass, which kills them off. The fact that we are still alive would mean that we haven't reached the filter yet. That filter could easily be climate change and the destruction we are bringing on the planet. We could be close to making ourselves extinct. Story 8: there is a reasonable conclusion for an intelligent species to arrive at that states that the possibility of encountering alien life is so potentially dangerous that the only reasonable decision to destroy any place intelligent life could exist. A near light speed object smaller than a phone booth would completely destroy a planet. The intelligent species then proceeds to launch these near light speed missiles at every planet in the habitable zone of any star in their galaxy. Those missiles proceed on course for tens of thousands of years, possibly outlasting the species that launched them, leading to an entirely sterile galaxy. There is no likely defense against this weapon. It only takes one determined species in a galaxy to do this, and it may have already started. Story 9: false vacuum decay. Basically, we assume our universe is a true vacuum existing in a stable state. If, however, it is a false vacuum, then at any point it could decay into a more stable state. The fallout from such a decay could range anywhere from changes to fundamental physical constants, which could lead to catastrophic results, to the complete destruction of all matter. The neat part is, if the universe is indeed a false vacuum, we have no way of knowing or predicting when this decay could happen and what the results would be. Any moment, and the whole thing could just pop out of existence. Or gravity could change and you could fly off the surface of the planet and slowly suffocate as the atmosphere dissipates, or the Earth's orbit could start drifting outward and we'd all slowly freeze and starve. Fun stuff. Story 10. The scariest hypothesis isn't necessarily the most catastrophic. It could be more mundane, yet still horrible. It's especially frightening if it's likely. Geologists have figured out one particular valley undergoes massive flooding about once every 150 years. The timing isn't exact. It may be off a few decades, but it happens. The whole valley basically turns into a temporary lake. This would be a local problem, except that the valley has some of the most fertile soil on Earth. It produces more than a third of a large country's vegetables. It wasn't an important region a couple centuries ago, but it is now. The next superflood there is going to cause rises in food prices so severe it'll make 2022 seem like a cakewalk by comparison. Certain types of food will practically vanish until that flood ends and the farms recover. That valley's production is so dominant that for a few crops, those shortages will be worldwide. Written records haven't been abundant in that region going back a long time. Only the most recent of the valley's superfloods still has eyewitness accounts. It happened in 1862. We're due for another. Story 11. I don't know if this is a widespread one, but this one is one that particularly freaks me out a bit. But basically, every action or decision you make, or others for that matter too, splits the universe into outcomes, one for each different decision you did or didn't make. It's particularly horrifying to me because it separates you from everyone. It doesn't literally, but how creepy is it to think that your consciousness would exist in one universe in one moment, and then a completely different universe in another? Maybe I'm just overthinking it, but it's super creepy to me. Story 12. One of the scariest theories known to mankind is the theory of existential risk, which posits that human civilization is vulnerable to various catastrophic events that could permanently destroy our species, or even the entire planet. These events could include global pandemics, nuclear war, asteroid impacts, and advanced artificial intelligence. The theory of existential risk highlights the fragility of human existence and the need for us to take urgent action to mitigate these threats and ensure the survival and flourishing of our species. Story 13. Not sure if it's the scariest known to mankind, but the whole concept of machines, robots, developing advanced intelligence and consciousness, which could potentially become evil, kind of freaks me out. Like, what if some evil robot comes to kill you in your sleep or something? Most humans are dumbasses, and you don't need to be too afraid of other people, but a robot will outsmart you. The really scary aspect is that they wouldn't be evil. They'd just be doing precisely what we told them. The problem is, with higher intelligence than our own, it's damn near impossible for us to realize the consequences of whatever instruction we give. The famous example is a machine that makes paper clips. Its goal is to make as many as it can. Seems harmless until it discovers it can hack into logistics and get resources diverted to it from everywhere to make the paper clips, or start turning everything it can find into paper clips. It doesn't have any concept of harm or enough. The only thing it knows is make more paper clips. Then it realizes it can work more efficiently by creating copies of itself. Now the universe is being flooded by these robots consuming everything, and if you try to stop it, it will fight you, because its goal is to make as many paper clips as possible, and it can't do that if it's stopped. Personally, though, I think the bigger threat isn't super intelligent AI doing what we literally asked for, instead of what we really wanted. It's AI just slightly smarter than us, doing exactly what people told it, which is to kill everyone who isn't them. Story 14. That all theories and hypothesis arguments are a predetermined collection of knowledge that others have agreed to be true. At one point, people on Earth agreed the Earth was flat and that ships could fall off the edge. Scholars and the highest of intellectual beings agreed upon one unequivocal fact: the Earth was flat. Of course, this has changed over time to now the Earth is round. It is a fact. Tomorrow we could find out that the Earth is shaped like a doggo. If the data and evidence says so, it'll be something agreed upon. The scariest theory hypothesis is that all we know and will know is only what we perceive. Truth of existence is a formulation of knowledge we comprehend, brought together by agreement of supposed truth. Story 15. The uncanny valley exists because there was a threat to us that looked almost like us. What was this threat? How was it a threat? Maybe Beowulf chronicled this as a reason. Imagine being alone, separated from your hunting party. You see someone up ahead. You call to them. As they stand, you see the body of Koros on the ground. Then the stranger stands, and you notice something wrong. The limbs aren't right. Too much hair on their arms. Wait, that's not a pelt they are wearing. They turn around, and their sacred gaze meets. You're the milky white of an injured eye, and another black as burnt wood. It crunches an eye between its teeth, and you see Kroos with empty eyelids. Story 16. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and find out I'm already dead. I think about this like this. If I were to die and find out I was able to do anything, like a Good Place style, this door will take you to any world you want. I would put myself into movie or book worlds, the real world, but I could do XYZ. I'd likely get bored of that after a while if the afterlife is permanent, and I'd start temporarily wiping my memory, whilst I experience the aforementioned alternate realities. And because it's absolutely something I do, I'm worried I've already done it and this is one of the worlds. Anyway, story 17. We are all living in a matrix. The perceptible world all around us is the matrix. We are bound to this world. We are completely enslaved to this world and our own senses. Breaking out from the sense of perceived apparent reality is akin to unplugging from the matrix. The matrix, or the world, is all around us. Our bodies are made from its material. Think about it. Your body is an amalgamation of earthly matter. You have forged your body from the food you have consumed. Not eating will lead to eventual death. Hence we are bound. Not breathing the air can cause instant death. This is bondage. We are limited by our own preferences, desires, and volition. We are trapped in a prison of our own creation, a prison for the mind by the mind. The ego entity seeks to protect itself by perpetuating self-delusion. Ignorance of our true nature is rampant, while knowledge is rare. We do not know our place in the universe, nor do we know the universe in its entirety. We hardly know 1% of the universe, yet we assume the nature of the remaining 99% of the universe, with the limited data we have gathered through our limited senses. The greatest joke is that we think we know it all. This is the ego saying it is in charge with a false sense of knowing. The intellect divides and seeks to know the nature of reality, all the while forgetting that splitting things up will result in limited and incomplete knowledge. Story 18. Dark Forest Theory. It basically runs counter to the Fermi paradox. It's the idea that whenever intelligent life finds another intelligent life, one kills the other as soon as it's spotted. In theory, it's done via a mass accelerator. It's actually pretty easy to make a planet extinct. You just have to slowly ramp up a big rock in their direction. You don't even need to get it to the speed of light, but you could get it close if you want to. Why would you do this to another world? So you get them before they can do it to you. Story 19. Proton decay. Effectively, if and once all the subatomic particles break down, there won't be enough energy to sustain increasing entropy and might end up ending everything forever, depending on future quantum fluctuations. In other words, the universe may not be cyclical at all, and the one we have right now might potentially be the only one which will ever exist. The Earth's eventual destruction by the sun is enough already to make one feel like life is meaningless. Proton decay and the heat death of the universe just brings it to a whole new level. Story 20. You're the only being that exists, and after dying, you will come to your original state, eternal painful loneliness that drives you into madness, floating alone in a dark emptiness of nothing but desperation. And in a try to escape from there, you will create another scenario again where you live in a society or surrounded by other living creatures, trying to feel company and love, but never feeling complete or satisfied. At times you will realize nothing is real, but you couldn't accept it or change it. At the end you will die again and see the truth, and you will start the show again and again and again for the rest of eternity. An endless cycle of lies, anguish, and sadness. I felt like that kind of often when I was a kid and a teen. Story 21. So this isn't scary at all, but it's a response to all of the talk about alien encounters, or lack thereof. I'm certain people smarter than me have already sorted this out, or at least named the theory, but here goes. Think about how much information we have been able to glean from distant objects without even approaching the objects. Now think about the level of remote exploration and discovery we're going to be capable of by the time we're able to physically travel from one solar system to another. Maybe the reason we haven't been contacted by aliens is because they don't have a reason to physically visit us. Maybe they understand that our crap would freak the hell out if they appeared, and there's no reason to, so they don't. Maybe we will reach the point where we can explore the universe in a virtual environment, and only expand to other planets in this solar system. Because why risk trying to do something we can already do from home? There's a considerable amount of arrogance in the idea that we're worth visiting, destroying, or anything else. Story 22. I like the conspiracy like theory that the Christian biblical flood was an actual event that almost wiped humanity out. It's very fascinating how the flood story, in one form or another, is part of a lot of legends and religious stories across the world, usually accompanied with stories of a snake falling from the sky and being given the means to build civilization. Nothing to do with God, though. Probably an asteroid that hit North America's ice sheet during the last ice age or something like that. There's a documentary on Netflix about it. The guy's a journalist outcast among actual archaeologists, so take it with a big grain of salt. But it's an interesting idea nonetheless, and scary to think about. Story 23. The Multiverse. Everyone travels through multiverses every day, through parallel realities. 99% of the time, nobody notices it. But 1% of the time, something happens that is so special and distinct, it may leave you baffled. Maybe an item of yours disappears into nothingness and suddenly reappears months later. Or a building you walk by every day suddenly just disappeared or never existed at all. It gets wilder with the quantum death theory. Anytime a person dies, that person wakes up in a different parallel universe where they are not dead. Say you are driving a car and you stop at a light. Left of you, you see a truck coming your way. You realize that you will not survive and close your eyes. When you open them, suddenly the truck is gone and you and your car are somewhere else. Maybe somewhere earlier. Maybe you see the truck pass by in front of your car. Maybe not. But in that previous universe where you were before you died, it's a scary feeling to potentially know that while I am alive somewhere in some universe, my family is mourning for me because I am dead in that universe. Story 24. Small-scale conspiracy theory. Here, my wife and I are staying at a beach resort that provides complimentary boogie boards. The caveat is that you can only rent them when water conditions are clear, aka the red danger flags are not up. Both this year and last year, the flags were up the entire time during our stay, regardless of ocean conditions. What's interesting, though, is that there are no lifeguards, and the resort doesn't prevent people from going in the water. And plenty of people have boogie boards. Where did they get them? They had to buy them at the resort store. My wife is fully convinced that the red flags are a coordinated scheme to sell boogie boards to vacationers and then collect them for free when people have to fly home, haha. Story 25. The Lost Cosmonauts. It's not your typical tinfoil hat stuff. This theory has just enough intrigue and historical context to make you wonder, what if? The theory suggests that during the height of the space race, the Soviet Union may have sent cosmonauts into space before Yuri Gagarin, the officially recognized first human in space. But these missions supposedly ended in tragedy, with the cosmonauts either dying in space or upon re-entry, and the Soviet Union covered it up to avoid public embarrassment. Cold War secrecy. The space race was as much about propaganda as it was about scientific achievement. Both the USSR and the USA were playing high-stakes poker with space exploration. Secrecy and disinformation were part of the game. Missing cosmonauts? There are accounts, albeit unverified, of radio transmissions intercepted by amateur radio operators. These transmissions hinted at unsuccessful missions and even stranded cosmonauts, Soviet space triumphs, and tragedies. We know about the USSR's secretive nature and their tendency to only publicize successes. The catastrophic failure of the N-1 moon rocket was kept under wraps for years. Could the same have happened with early human space flights? But no concrete evidence. Here's the catch. There's no definitive proof. It's all based on hearsay, circumstantial evidence, and a few eerie recordings. The Soviet archives haven't coughed up any smoking guns yet. So, is it possible that there were lost cosmonauts, victims of the space race, who orbited the Earth in silence and despair? The plausibility lies in the context of the times, a high-pressure race to space, cloaked in secrecy and national pride. It's a theory that, while unconfirmed, isn't entirely outlandish given the era's nature. Story 26. Big sock. When I was a kid, we had like 2 or 3 kinds of socks total. White calf, white crew, and black dress. The rich people also had argyle, but no one else could afford them. Then, the secret conglomerates started going crazy. Gray, blue, funky prints. It initially started with those stupid rainbow toe socks and launched from there. And sock sales skyrocketed. Then came the really sneaky part. They convinced people that you don't have to match socks. And their sales really went up. What the hell, man? All we needed was like 4 or maybe 5 types max. Now these super rich jerks are flying helicopters and vacationing in Greece or wherever on that sweet, sweet sock money. Wake up, people. Story 27. When Michael J. Fox dies, he will be the final victim of serial killer Robert Pickton. Pickton was a pig farmer in Canada who fed his victims to his pigs to cover up his crimes. Here's the thing. There are some diseases, notably prion diseases, that are notoriously difficult to kill. A pig can eat someone with a prion disease, and that same pig can be butchered and processed and cooked, and the prions will survive. Once you eat the tainted meat, the death clock countdown starts. Prions will multiply in your system. There is no vaccine or cure or treatment. Parkinson's has many symptoms in common with a prion disease. It's a progressively degenerative neural disease. There's some genetic component, but some cases appear out of nowhere. Fox's breakout role was Leo and Me, a short-run Canadian TV show. This show is noteworthy because 4 other people on the set have developed Parkinson's against all known odds. Leo and Me filmed just when Picton's serial killing was getting started. It cannot be proven, but it is within the realm of possibility that Picton's tainted pork ended up on the craft services table for Leo and Me and gave the people who ate the sausage rolls or ham and cheese sandwiches prion disease. Story 28. That the CIA was heavily involved in the spread and success of modern art as a means to easily create value and move money. Before we had to wait before some dead masters were rediscovered and their paintings became valuable. But with modern art, it was possible to manufacture success. They could use PR, grease a few critics, and all of a sudden, they created value. That was perfect to launder money or to avoid controls and checks. Story 29. Not even sure if there is a theory about this, but let me throw this one out. Deleting a Facebook, Instagram, Google, whatever account doesn't really delete anything, while your public or publicized information is no longer available to you or others. However, it is still available to Facebook and their partners. In other words, you still exist until a set date. After that, no new information is available to you. Old information can be used in whatever way desired. As we know, humans tend to follow patterns, so it would be relatively easy to target you via other methods. The same exists for Google. Just because they say they delete your information, it doesn't really mean that they do. You just can't find it. Story 30. The one where the NSA is branching out to social media, and Reddit in particular, in an attempt to preemptively identify individuals holding sensitive information on fringe topics and target them for re-education or straight-up removal from society before they put together enough of the puzzle pieces to form a significant portion of any of the broader narratives. Such agencies are in part tasked with obfuscating against wider scrutiny. It's theorized they initiate regular purges with seemingly innocuous thread titles like, "What conspiracy theory is plausible enough to be true?" with the simple goal of tracking a subset of comments which would indicate a level of insight into secret documentation and black ops policy that crosses a certain agency thresholds, and going after these individuals too. Story 1. If aliens are on this planet, they are likely using the ocean as a place to hide. Absolutely. The Nimitz encounter and some of the best actual video evidence we have shows that UFOs and USOs might be the same thing, and that they can easily travel through water and air both. Plus, there have been rumors about Lake Baikal in Russia for centuries. Lake Baikal is one of the deepest lakes on Earth and could absolutely harbor some crazy crap. Story 2. Consider the fact that the human race is a divided mess of contradictory intents. We have the scientific community reaching out peacefully, yet if aliens do come into the airspace of any nation, the first to greet them would be the military. You can imagine what the response of the military would be when a UFO enters forbidden airspace. Given the declassified government files regarding UFOs, it is quite likely that contact has been attempted in the past, and the results being tragic. Story 3. That if any civilization elsewhere in the universe had the technology to reach us for any reason, they'd be very likely to also be able to disguise their presence from our detection methods. That is, they could observe us close up, using nanotech, microscopic biological spacecraft, etc., and we'd never know. Story 4. The best two. I've heard, we don't allow ourselves to contact lost tribes in the Amazon or other wild places. Extraterrestrials may have similar laws on a galactic scale. We split the atom, but made weapons out of them instead of trying to reach the stars. They leave us alone out of fear that we'll destroy ourselves if war accidentally breaks out. Story 5. There are so many star systems with potentially inhabitable planets out there that the chances that we have been the only life in the universe is extremely slim. The question instead is whether life arising elsewhere has managed to survive destruction and remain alive today, such that they might be able to contact us. That is to say, there have probably been countless civilizations for the past several billion years that simply haven't made it. Not just destruction. A lot of coincidences happened hundreds of millions of years ago that allowed us to progress to the point we are at now. Case in point, the Carboniferous period, where, highly simplified, trees evolved and existed for millions of years without the bacteria existing to break them down like now. So, millions of years of trees piling up several hundred million years ago gave us the coal deposits that powered the Industrial Revolution. If the bacteria had evolved more in line with the trees, we might still be riding around in carriages. Story 6, that life in the universe could be so unrecognizable to us that we wouldn't even register it as being alien life. What if life on another world was not carbon-based, but another element? How would we even know what to look for since our definitions and descriptions of life are based on a completely different perspective? The universe is so big, and who knows what kind of chain of events and chemical, or even not chemical, reactions went down on the other side that led to a creation of species that behave completely different than ours. It's why I find it so weird that people think you can't have life without water. It's kind of understandable at the same time, as it's sometimes hard to imagine things outside of our scope of understanding. Story 7, UFOs are higher dimensional objects moving through our dimension. Like, if we moved a 3D object through 2D space, to a 2D being, it would look crazy weird. A hollow sphere would start as a dot, then look like a hula hoop that starts small, gets big, then small again. They'd have no idea what they were looking at. So, what would a higher dimension object look like passing through our 3D dimension? It might rapidly change shape, or appear to move at incredible speed as the whatever moved through our spacetime. Gravity wouldn't affect it, I don't think. It wouldn't appear to have any form of propulsion. Story 8. The movie Contact actually makes a good case that we haven't been visited by UFOs or aliens. Our most powerful broadcasts have traveled at best a few dozen light years from this planet. To put that into perspective, if the Milky Way galaxy was the same size as North America, the Earth would be a speck of dust floating around a knickknack on a living room table in a house in Arizona. Our most powerful broadcast signals have made it to the end of the driveway, or at best across the street. If there were a hyper-intelligent species 2 blocks over, desperately listening for signs of intelligence in the neighborhood, they wouldn't even know we existed for at least a couple thousand years. When they finally picked up our signal, our first television broadcasts, it would take their response another couple thousand years to arrive here. The even more bleak reality is that beyond a few light years, even the most powerful radio signals will be indistinguishable from background noise. Barring a civilization currently in existence around one of the very nearest stars, unlikely if only given the sheer timescales involved, we'll almost certainly never make contact with extrastellar life. The silver lining is that there's a non-zero chance we'll find life somewhere in our own solar system, should we choose to go out and look for it. Story 9. They come from the ocean, not space. This sort of reminds me of the plot of The Castaways, an episode from the 1950s radio show X-1. The US government is conducting nuclear tests off an island in the Pacific. The local tribe, rather than be relocated, commits mass suicide by marching into the ocean. Turns out, they were merely returning to their spaceship, which had been submerged for hundreds of years underwater after crash landing on Earth without fuel to get back home. One of the nuclear scientists overseeing the tests was actually a member of the tribe who had infiltrated society to help humans develop nuclear technology. He steals a bomb in order to fuel their trip home. It's a cool story. Story 10. There's a very simple explanation as to why abductees independently described gray aliens as looking the same. There are no aliens and no abduction took place, but rather they are abstracting residual memories left over from being infants and looking up at adults. Before an infant's visual cortex is fully developed, an adult human looking down at them would appear rounded and gray in color with large eyes. Cross that indistinct memory with a sleep state, subconscious, and standard psychological patterns, and boom, alien abduction. It also explains the sensation of being lifted, examined, and probed. Story 11. All the UFO sightings throughout history are just humans from the future on a time-traveling safari meant to observe how we were in the past. They are supposed to keep out of sight, but thanks to human-mechanical errors, There have been hiccups with their cloaking, which have resulted in being seen. That's why there have always been so many reports of them throughout history. But there has never been an attack. It's just us. Also, the reason why we don't see as many examples of UFOs now, even though pretty much everyone has a camera, is because people are not that interested in this time period, since we already document aspects of human life all the time. To add on to this, the evidence is that as we begin to rely more on technology, we will rely less on our own body, which combined with space travel will cause loss of mass, rely more on our eyes and intellect, causing our eyes and head to enlarge in order to take in more information. Likely, this advanced civilization no longer eats food, but rather has a way to synthesize nutrients directly into their systems. This will cause our mouths to shrink. Lastly, frequent space travel will mean a lack of sunlight, will cause our skin to grow pale and gray. Even further, I heard another theory that expands on this one, that the reason why they need to visit us and experiment on us is that their gene pool has essentially been corrupted and that they need fresh DNA in order to continue as a species. Story 12. The US military has intentionally orchestrated alien sightings and kidnappings, as well as funded UFO religions and conspiracy theories, to prevent people from being taken seriously should they happen to notice some experimental planes and so forth. There are no aliens, but there are US military agents in goofy spacesuits who mutilate cattle and probe deranged people to encourage them to make fools of themselves. Story 13. That they are from a breakaway human civilization that is keeping their secrets to themselves. Essentially, that someplace like Wakanda is real, or that Jules Verne really isn't science fiction. It's actually science fact. When the rest of the world was making do with steam powered industrialization, someone figured out anti gravity and 0 point energy from the interaction between electromagnetism and gravity. So they kept this technology for themselves and have been zipping around the rest of us keeping an eye on things. Story 14. I don't believe it, but that they live in underground caves and dwell primarily in Antarctica. I don't remember the complete theory, but people say they're an advanced race adapted for life underground, and that they have advanced machinery because they have been living on the Earth longer than humans. Interesting. My grandfather had a high security clearance with the Navy and Air Force, was stationed in Key West and also later Wright-Patterson. He did not talk much of anything he saw and was aware about, often stating there some things were better off not knowing. One drunken night, my father mentioned how he can't believe there's other life in outer space, to which my grandfather replied, "No one ever said they were from outer space." Often makes me believe there's a hyper-intelligent species here on Earth, perhaps deep within the ocean. Lost city of Atlantis, perhaps. But Antarctica would make sense, especially how most of it is blacked out via Google Maps, and also is forbid from being G-visited, yet most presidents and other high-ranking government and military personnel are known to visit. Story 15. Dark Forest Theory. I found this fascinating. Little description here. For anyone wondering, the Dark Forest solution explains why we haven't heard from aliens by positing that they are purposefully keeping quiet. The reasoning is laid out best in the science fiction novel The Dark Forest by Liu Cixin. The plot of the book, the second in a series, concerns questions of how to best interact with potentially hostile alien life. In the novel, the argument is laid out like this. All life desires to stay alive. There is no way to know if other life forms can or will destroy you if given a chance. Lacking assurances, the safest option for any species is to annihilate other life forms before they have a chance to do the same. Since all other life forms in the novel are risk-averse and willing to do anything to save themselves, contact of any kind is dangerous, as it almost assuredly would lead to the contacted race wiping out whoever was foolish enough to give away their location. This leads to all civilizations attempting to hide in radio silence. Story 16. If you wanted to explore space, you'd send technology instead of risking the life of a scientist. The little gray-green men and other now cliché depictions are just biological computers that they can control. And that's why they look so simplistic and unidentifiable. Reminds me of robot, or droids. There are stories that purportedly say that the little green-gray aliens have slits for mouths and no organ, as though they are flesh being engineered for a specific purpose. We are already starting to 3D print human organs. Our technology would be primitive compared to theirs. Imagine continuing to improve our technology. Where does it lead? Maybe to the ability to 3D print beings that are engineered for a specific purpose. Story 17. The premise of the movie Prometheus. Lots of people did not get the movie, especially the opening shots. A group of space travelers land on a planet that can support life, but does not have intelligent life yet. Their mission is to bring life to the universe. It would take millions of years for life to evolve on this plane. So they decide to give it a boost. They played God with our evolution. The travelers draw lots for one of them to sacrifice himself to seed life on the planet. So the chosen one takes a pill to disintegrate his DNA into the water of the plant, where his DNA combines with the amino acids in the oceans and forms all life. Of all the life forms that were created, one retains the most alien attributes: humans. The planet is Earth. The theory is this is the reason for so much diversity in life on Earth, but only one species with such heightened and evolved intelligence is because we are the hybrid alien. Later, the aliens realized that giving a boost and a jumpstart to the DNA of humans is a violation because it does not allow for evolution of other attributes. Hey, morality, empathy, and lack of violence, ability to integrate with nature instead of trying to abuse it. So their creation, us, will pose a threat to all life in the universe once we develop space travel technology. Since the gods created us, the gods decided to destroy us with the perfect weapon, another hybrid creation, but this time combining human DNA with another alien life. On the way to deliver the perfect weapon, they die and never complete the mission. Millions of years later, we developed space travel, and in our quest to find our origins, we found aliens' remains and inadvertently completed the mission, creating our extinction. To sum it up, we are the aliens on Earth. The true extraterrestrial aliens who created us are trying to destroy us. If we survive, we will destroy all other life. Story 18. The gist is like this. Imagine in the future, we decide to settle, say, Europa, with genetically engineered humans. Since genetic engineering is still controversial, or for whatever other reason you prefer, we decide to keep them isolated from humanity, not telling them about our existence, and simply follow their development as an experiment. So now we have this new race of humanoids on Europa who aren't advanced at all and think they are alone there, albeit seeing a human every now and then, since we still have to get in there sometimes to adjust stuff. They think of the humans they see as divine beings, since we're way more advanced, obviously. At some point, a catastrophe on Earth requires humanity to leave the solar system in a rush, and the humanoids of Europa are just left there. They continue to thrive and develop, remembering humans as their gods and their religions. Humans come back to observe their children's development from time to time, and those humans become prophets in the humanoids. Now, what if we are the race left behind? Story 19. The closest alien civilization, 92 light years away, died out hundreds of millions of years ago. The next closest, 460 light years from us, will begin evolving any day now and will attain technical mastery, rivaling ours in about 1 billion more years. Currently, there are two other civilizations in our galaxy, one waning and one waxing. The closest of them is 23,737 light years away. We don't just have to line up on a relatively close spatial scale. Time frame is as much a factor as distance. Most civilizations don't have a window of more than 20,000 years where they flourish before petering or flashing out. Let's not forget that faster than light travel is theoretical at best, wildly impractical in reality, probably requiring the energy of many stars to be useful. In our own galaxy, no civilization has even colonized more than 5-star systems, much less cannibalized them for speed juice. In short, nobody's been here, and probably nobody ever will. So it goes. Story 20. I've come across two that make sense to me. Neither denies the possibility of aliens, but both posit that humans and aliens will likely never interact in a meaningful way. Aliens are long gone. The odds that humans will cross paths with another intelligent life form is slim. What if the aliens we are looking for are an extinct race of beings that existed millions of years ago? Maybe their civilization peaked during the age of the dinosaurs, or even earlier. Who knows? They may have visited Earth when the most complex life was a single-celled organism and moved on. Any aliens that reach Earth are lone travelers. Our species is just now exploring space travel, and it takes a long time to reach other planets. Imagine if another species in another solar system, just a few hundred years ahead of us technologically, has sent out a one-way exploration mission. They couldn't possibly make it to Earth and back in one lifetime. The best they can hope for is to observe, collect data, and send it back to be received by the next generation. Story 21. That we haven't met a single one yet, because they're either as technologically advanced as us, or not as much as us. We always imagine, thanks to movies and crap, that aliens are superior beings, more advanced in every aspect. But what if all the sentient races of the universe are actually all roughly on the same level, technologically speaking? What if the reason we still haven't met them is because they, too, can't travel any further than their own solar system or the closest astral body to them? And the reason we can't meet each other is because none of us are advanced enough, technologically speaking, to even find each other. Imagine what we think about aliens today, now applied to other races. They most likely think the same thing as us about what they call their alien. Story 22. I might be dumb. Follow me on this ride. Me and my cousins were 100% convinced there was an alien living next door. He had a weirdly shaped pasture in his backyard. He randomly had soda machines next to the pasture that were not there or replaced with a totally different brand, with only 4 buttons. As a weirdo and geocaching funny joke, we went out there. It's so eerie seeing the things gone from out there. It's like nothing can grow in this ring of junk and trees. Funny enough, this property owner has died and it can't be found. But the overall creepiness still exists. Story 23. Due to the way the universe has developed over time, gas turned to stars, stars formed galaxies, planets formed around stars, etc. There is actually reason to believe that the Earth may have been among the first planets to become habitable. The universe is old, but not infinitely old. The first few billion years at least were entirely uninhabitable. It's possible that 4 billion years ago, when the Earth formed into something that was stable enough to leave evidence, was when the universe itself first became capable of supporting life. If that's the case, then that would make Earth one of the first planets to support life in the entire universe. Assuming that intelligent life requires a few billion years to develop on other planets, like it did here, then again we may be the very first occurrence of sapient life in the universe. For all we know, there might be an explosion of extraterrestrial life that happens in a million years. That is very little time on galactic scales, almost within a margin of error, and yet that is longer than all of recorded human history by orders of magnitude. We may simply be early bloomers who fade away before the rest of the universe produces intelligent life. Story 24. Time moves slower, closer to a black hole, and there's a big ass one at the center of our galaxy. Anyone further in than us hasn't had enough time to evolve yet, and anyone further out from us, while possibly evolved enough for faster than light travel, would be coming here on basically a suicide mission. Their species would likely be extinct before they got back home. The only place aliens can feasibly come from, or that we can go to, is a narrow band laterally around the Milky Way, which reduces the Drake equation dramatically. The most feasible source of aliens is us, i.e., we go out and colonize new nearby planets. If we did that, it's quite likely that something like a comet or climatic change would disrupt the historical continuity of at least one of the planets over a long enough time period. At least one of them would get sent back to the Stone Age and forget there were ever other humans out in the galaxy. Meanwhile, both sections of humanity would experience divergent evolution, coming to appear different from each other while being internally and functionally the same. Anatomically modern humans have been on this planet for 300,000 years. This round of civilization has only been going on for 10,000 years. There has been enough time for our species to evolve from hunter-gatherer to spacefaring level at least 30 times over. Story 25. I think they're American military counterintelligence. The first sightings in the 40s and 50s, I think, were people just telling stories. Those blew up, of course. And we know that many purported sightings have been bullcrap. I think at that time it occurred to the US military that these sightings could be useful cover for experimental aircraft and intentionally upped the intrigue. It's hard for other nations to get a good read on the state of the USAF's capabilities if there's so much noise. I think the recent releases of videos are meant to spur people back into the UFO craze as we enter a new era of aerial combat. We've had drone bombers for a decade. Drone fighter programs must be reaching the stage where they're viable for combat operations. I hadn't considered UFOs as a means of counterintelligence in the past, but a while back, I was thinking about what capabilities a drone fighter might have, and it occurred to me that very high G maneuvers aren't a problem if there isn't a pilot present. In that case, it's very likely that a drone fighter would move in ways that are typically associated with UFOs, like quickly reversing direction entirely. That could be achieved by using turbines with exhausts that can be directed 360 degrees around the yaw axis. If that approach was taken, the aircraft would need to be roughly circular so that its aerodynamic properties are consistent regardless of the direction of thrust, so saucer-like. I've also thought about another design with various channels through the body of the aircraft for thrust direction. This one I think could look even freakier since probably it wouldn't even be generating lift with a wing, but by directing thrust through whichever channel happens to be facing downward at the moment. Imagine a sphere with a bunch of holes in it flying around, although it probably wouldn't be spherical because that would be awkward for manufacturing. Perhaps pill shaped? Story 1. The government performs mass surveillance in the name of national security. People think there's actually secret agents listening to every phone call in America, when in reality, it's an elaborate computer system that just scans millions of phone calls and picks up certain keywords for review. If they had tens of thousands of people monitoring calls, then this would have leaked really fast. Story 2. Black helicopters. In the 90s, tinfoil hat, conspiracy nuts were always talking about upgraded Black Hawk helicopters that were virtually silent at altitude and nearly invisible to radar. Black helicopters were at the top of the list of jokes when it came to conspiracy nuts, along with jokes about alien butt probes and tinfoil hats. But a decade later, when SEAL Team 6 went in and killed Osama, the US government casually admitted the SEALs were dropped in on modified Blackhawks, called black helicopters from the CIA, only because one crashed and couldn't be recovered. Had that helicopter got out, they would have made zero mention of them, probably for years to come. Story 3. The war on drugs started by Nixon was intended to gain political power, not improve public health. You want to know what this war on drugs was really all about? The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black. But by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. John Ehrlichman, assistant to the president for domestic affairs under President Richard Nixon. Story 4, I'm going to use this to talk about conspiracies in general. The term has a negative connotation because we associate it with the really extreme examples. Moon landing was staged, Earth is flat, and all the governments that are warring are in on it, etc. But all a conspiracy is people making decisions and plans behind closed doors. That crap happens literally all the time. Your friends and family are planning a surprise birthday party for you. That's a conspiracy. And if the way they're acting makes you think they're planning a surprise party for you, you're now a conspiracy theorist. Story 5. That the reason that fruits and veggies are becoming seedless is because companies are genetically modifying so that they can monopolize produce. Because without seeds, the people can't make their own choice to grow their food, thus being completely dependent on their businesses and governments when global warming rises, causing there to be a shortage of fresh food. A lot of the seeds from fruits we eat are sterile anyway. And that's not because of GM, because seedless fruits and fruits with sterile seeds predate GM tech and just resulted from aggressive crossbreeding and things like graft propagation. Let's not demonize the whole tech of GM here, which has saved many, many lives. Farmer dependency on GM or any specific type of crop they have to buy should be a concern. But if you educate yourself more on these issues, you'll realize that there is valid non-conspiratorial reasoning for some of this stuff happening. It's not really a grand long game conspiracy for when the ice caps melt and put Florida underwater. Story 6. The CIA-Contra Conspiracy. The Reagan administration was selling cocaine to secretly fund the Contras in their efforts to overthrow the Sandinistas, who were in control of the Nicaraguan government in the 80s. So publicly, he was Mr. Just Say No to Drugs, and even began the DARE program in American elementary schools to help in the war on drugs, making multiple public speeches about the harms of drugs and the dangers they present. But behind the scenes, he was having the CIA use the cocaine they acquired through drug busts to be sold and distributed to poor Black American communities to fund the Contras in their attempts to overthrow the Sandinistas, resulting in the crack epidemic and causing massive amounts of damage to millions of American families. But modern conservatives will tell you he was the greatest president ever. Story 7. North Korea claimed the U.S. used biological weapons against them. They showed the shells that deployed infected insects. They showed a video of pilots admitting the crime. At least one captured pilot was from Fort Detrick, where our program is based. The CIA called it brainwashing and denied the claims. Sure, that's possible, but it's also possible they told the truth. Watch Wormwood and make your own call. I think we did it. I think the CIA killed the former head of the bioweapons program before he went public. The subject of the Wormwood series, they used a brilliant cover story involving LSD, which made the public focus on LSD and not a suspicious death. Do you think the president who dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan would blink at using HARD to detect bioweapons 6 years later when the war wasn't going well? Story 8. There are a number of conspiracy theories that have turned out to be true over the years. Here are a few of the most notable ones. 1. The U.S. government's involvement in the Watergate scandal. This conspiracy theory began circulating after snippets of conversation from a 1972 conversation between President Nixon and his chief of staff, Haldeman, were revealed to the public. In these conversations, Nixon and Haldeman discussed plans to use the CIA to spy on and disrupt the activities of Democratic politicians who were seen as a threat to Nixon's re-election campaign. The theory was initially dismissed by many as being far-fetched, but it was eventually proven true when more evidence came to light. Story 9. Biometric scanners. I don't remember the exact details, but in the 70 S80S, an ex-Area 51 employee whistle blew some of the advanced technology being used and experimented in Area 51, one of which was biometric hand scanners that would grant access to specific employees based on their clearance level. Nobody believed him because biometric scanners were deemed too high technologies, too science fiction, until pictures in the scanners began to get declassified. Story 10. Conspiracy. The Canada government was so paranoid about homosexuality that it developed a gaydar machine. The truth, it really happened. In the 1960s, the government hired a university professor to develop a way to detect homosexuality in federal employees. He came up with a machine that measured pupil dilation in response to same-gender exciting imagery. The Canadian government used it to exclude or fire more than 400 men from civil service, the military, and the Mounties. The American government is just as guilty with these 10 secret U.S. government operations revealed. Story 11. In the U.S., tobacco companies spend decades bribing the media, politicians, and scientists to lie about smoking actually being healthy and recommended by doctors. I mean, it was recommended by doctors way back in the 40s and 50s when commercial pre-rolled and filtered cigarettes were becoming common. The logic was that because you were intentionally aggressively inhaling, you were doing good for your lungs by the regular overexpansion thereof. The filters were thought to keep the tar out, so you get a buzz from the nicotine, better lung capacity, and no side effects. Didn't take very long for that to change. Around the mid to late 60s, heavy smokers were being used in clinical trials to show how bad smoking is. And yes, I smoke. Edit. Crap. I forgot to mention that you're right. And Big Tobacco did bribe everyone to think smoking is healthy. Story 12. Government giving people cancer by doing illegal tests on them. For example, in the mid-1950s, and again a decade later, the Army used motorized blowers atop a low-income housing high-rise, at schools and from the backs of station wagons, to send a potentially dangerous compound into the already hazy air in predominantly black areas of St. Louis. But in 1994, the government said the tests were part of a biological weapons program, and St. Louis was chosen because it bore some resemblance to Russian cities that the U.S. might attack. The material being sprayed was zinc cadmium sulfide, a fine fluorescent powder. The area of the secret testing is described by the Army in documents obtained by Martino Taylor through a Freedom of Information Act request as a densely populated slum district. About 3/4 of the residents were black. Story 13. The sinking of the Lusitania. The Germans justified sinking it due to it being used for military transport, while the British claimed it was merely a civilian vessel only. Since the Germans attacked a civilian vessel that included Americans, it caused the U.S. to join the war against them. Looking back, it was quite a jerk move to allow American, and others of course, civilians unknowingly board a vessel being used for military operations during a war without telling them. I wonder what the American public would have thought about that at the time if they knew the British were not being completely truthful. I am not a historian, so if I am missing or skewing any details, please jump in here. Story 14. I don't think many people realize how difficult it is for a government or literally any organization to keep a secret for years, let alone decades. Some of these conspiracies had actual hard evidence to demonstrate their validity. It honestly seems like they get around this by just poisoning the well. If you have 5 people out there spreading bullcrap as the truth and one real whistleblower, what's the difference? Absolutely destroy anyone with evidence like Thomas Drake or Chelsea Manning, and you've got a pretty solid system for keeping things tight. Plus, if a conspiracy requires 100 people to execute, only the top 2 to 5 need to know the full extent of what they're doing. Everyone else gets some innocuous version, and you end up with software developers making encryption software for a contractor that they never know will be used for, say, Prism or the like. We know stuff like MK Ultra and Northwoods were kept quiet for a long time. Stuff like the Lusitania still isn't 100% solid, even a century later. I actually think it's easier to muddy the waters, keep conspirators in the dark, and obscure what's up than people realize. Story 15. According to leaked government documents, it's very probable that the CIA killed Marilyn Monroe. Netflix has a documentary mentioning it. Fascinating stuff. Her phone was tapped for having an affair with JFK and his brother. They were ghosting her. So she talked to a journalist and threatened to expose government secrets. Don't remember exactly what the transcript said, but it was about Roswell and Area 51 crap. Like 2 days later, before she could blab, she overdosed. Suspicious timing, don't you think? Apparently, no government will confirm alien contact because civilians would panic in the streets. We panic over things every day. Why would it matter? And I'm pretty sure we wouldn't care about aliens at this point. When xenomorphs and predators don't scare us, tiny, gray, childlike men allegedly won't scare us either. Not saying I'm deaf a believer, but there are just too many pilots who do to not make me seriously think about it. And the US government sure has a shady past, so why trust their denials anyway? They've been denying shady facts for decades, like presidents keeping it in their pants. Embarrassing. The documentary is called Unacknowledged. Worth a checkout if you haven't already seen it. And check out Bob Lazar on Joe Rogan's podcast, YouTube. He allegedly worked at Area 51. There's also a documentary about him on Netflix, but cannot recommend, as I didn't finish it. It started out really pretentious, so I got bored real quick. If anyone made it through the whole thing, was it worth it? In that case, I might be willing to try again. Story 16. Conspiracy theorists and technologists were certain, dead certain, that the sort of mass surveillance system possessed by the US existed and was being used, and surmised that Britain and other nations were complicit in it. Almost a decade after I first heard mention of the probability that such a thing existed, Mr. Snowden revealed the existence of exactly that thing to the world, as well as the details of how it operates, and how utterly liberty-destroying it is. As it turned out, even the tinfoil hat-wearing people in the world underestimated the sheer level of criminality and abuse that the system made possible. For many years, if you were to say to an American person that for decades, and still continuing to this day, the US government routinely involves itself in regime change operations, economic destabilization efforts, and deliberate sabotage of nations south of the US-Mexico border, the odds were that 9 times out of 10, you'd be called an idiot for even suggesting that the great and wonderful United States of America would ever do something so shady. These days, it is actually commonly known that CIA operatives had a hand in the initial creation of most of the serious cartel networks at one time or another, run guns across the border on the regular, blew up passenger aircraft, committed assassinations of politicians, and also fostered rebellions by very shady people with shady political beliefs, just to keep the nations south of the US-Mexico border powerless and reliant on cooperation with and use of the petrodollar. Most recently, PMCs were captured trying to start some kind of revolution, and the deafening silence from the sort of people who used to deny the facts to one's face was very succulent and flavorful. Story 17. Aliens and UFOs are real, and they've been covered up, and the subject stigmatized ever since the Brookings Institute advised the Pentagon in the 1960 Brookings Report that disclosure would disrupt economic stability, national security, and potentially cause mass panic. We're slowly being drip-fed the truth now, with the New York Times releasing footage of UAPs in operation, several patents from the Navy describing anti-gravity spacecraft, as well as a zero-point or quantum vacuum energy device, and more open dialogues regarding the phenomenon and technologies from government representatives involved around the globe. This and the upcoming announcement of life on other bodies within our solar system, to be announced by NASA sometime before the next election. Story 18. That there actually might not be any gold in Fort Knox. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't add up about it, and I've been there in my time in the Army, and it was boring as crap, with a pretty relaxed security as compared to other installations I've been on. When this conspiracy was hitting its peak in 2017, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin took a $27,000 military aircraft trip there. There are pictures of him in a weird chalkboard-lined room with several stacks of what appear to be gold bars behind him. But oddly enough, these pictures are in a grainy black and white, so you can't actually confirm what he's holding. Before this trip, the last known outside audit of Fort Knox was in 1953. It's the only conspiracy I can get behind. Story 19. The Vatican is hiding stuff. Old scrolls, forgotten books, all sorts of stuff. I really don't think this is a conspiracy theory. If you want to have a look at a book slash scroll slash whatever from the Vatican archive, you need to request that book. Kicker is they don't publish a list of their inventory, so you need to know what is in there. They won't even tell you if a book is there or not, or they don't want you to see it. To be fair, some libraries work something like that. I study archaeology and had some classes on Christian art history, archaeology. Also, there are a ton of conflicting religious texts out there. It was only when the Eastern Roman emperors, Constantine, Justinian, or Valentinian especially, had their councils that the whole Christian thing was streamlined. There were different Christian communities all around the Mediterranean at first, and they often incorporated local legends and content from other religions. Later on, when 300, 400, Christianity got a little more prominent, they even had disagreements to the point where Constantine and later emperors had to step in. Just have a look at the apocryphal writings known today so you can kind of extrapolate what was around back in the day. Story 20. North Korea hasn't been properly Kim controlled since Kim Il sung, who died in 1994. Since then, it's been a military junta, and the Kims are kept on somewhat of a leash for continuity and to give the plebs something to rally around and focus on. Fear keeps them in line, and it's all theater that gives them a sense of purpose so they don't ask too many questions. Kim Jong il even said to a foreign visitor that it was all fake and his people hated him. The elites are effectively held to ransom in a life of obscene luxury, and there is a lot of paranoia, jockeying, and rival factions. High ranking defectors and various diplomats have actually hinted at this. It's also well known that the top military ranks know their situation is a joke and that they would get squashed by anyone they went to war with. It's just yet another way of rallying the population around a cause and keeping them on their toes. South Korea and the CIA have also said that they cannot be 100% sure exactly what's going on and how the system really works. There have also been leaks that suggest the well informed North Korean diplomatic class are privately not happy with one Kim after another and feel that something has to give. For what it's worth, I don't see North Korea surviving in its current form for another